Hi, this is Dane Evans from A Queer Death, here with my first book review, which I'm very excited about. I read a lot of books about death and dying, the dying process, the afterlife, things like that. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about some of the books. The first book that I'm reviewing today is Free Yourself from Death Anxiety. This is a workbook by a doctor and a professor. This is a workbook using CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, to walk you through some of the anxiety that a lot of us hold around death and dying. I say a lot of us because, of course, there's some people who don't have fears around death, and I love that for them. I think that's great. It's not me. I have used this book a lot, as you can tell by the fact that it's kind of falling apart.
Die.
So the first thing that I wanted to mention is that anytime anybody reads a book, they're reading the book through their own lens, and my lens is as a white cis queer person. So that's the lens that I was reading this book through, and it is a book written by two cis white people, cis white academics, even. So the experience that I had reading it, the experience that I had using this workbook, will be different for people who have a different lens that they read things through. So I wanted to preface this by saying that, although I found this book helpful, I can't speak for everybody, and would love it if you wanted to tell me what your experience with this book was. So I wanted to talk about first, its voice and tone. In my review that I wrote online on my Substack, I said it's like sitting in the office of a very knowledgeable therapist. But you never get to hear about the therapist's personal life. You never hear what the therapist is doing on the weekend. And what I mean by that is that, they do use we to say, we experience these things, da 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 da, which is great. But you're not going to leave this book having a better understanding of who the authors are. I guess that's not the point. It's a workbook. So you're supposed to, know yourself better. And I certainly found that was the case. So maybe it's not important that we know, a lot of backstory about the authors. But it's not, and we'll talk about this a little later, it's not a book that brings a lot of comfort reading it. It's a lot of hard work reading it and working with, some of the exercises that they have. Death is a really tough topic to talk about. It's a really tough subject to dive deep into. And this book really dives deep into it. And so I wouldn't say that this is a comforting book, but I think that the exercises that it moves you through actually bring you to a comfortable spot, if that makes sense. But I also have a book recommendation for something that is very comforting to read. So if it is something that you're looking for comfort on and not looking to really dive deep into it, explore, I will suggest that book later. So, yeah, it talks about the fear of death and dying in scientific and philosophical ways. One of my favorite quotes from this book is actually, let me find it. I have all these other things bookmarked, but not this quote. I only have a star written next to it. I have right here. It's under a section called Thoughts About the Awfulness of Not Existing, including how bad it would be not to experience anything ever again, which is a fear that I wrestle with, and this book has helped me with. There's a quote from Seneca, who is an ancient philosopher, and it goes, Wouldn't a man seem to you the greatest of all fools if he wept because for 1,000 years previously he had not been alive? So it's asking the question, we don't grieve every day because we were not alive before we were born. So why do we grieve so badly when we to think about the idea that we're going to die? We've already kind of been there before, which is a really interesting premise and something that has brought me a lot of, I wouldn't say comfort, but definitely a better understanding of my feelings around death and dying. So I wanted to talk about some examples of the exercises that they have. First of all, they have really great resources like this. Oh, this chart. I wanted to talk about this chart too. There's a chart in here that it looks like a little, almost a bell curve kind of, with death anxiety on the side axis and then religiosity on the bottom axis. And I think that's really interesting how it seems like the people who are the least religious and the people who are most religious have the least amount of death anxiety. And it's the people in the middle, the agnostics and the people who struggle with faith, like I do, who are in the center with the most amount of anxiety around death and dying. And they talk about that. There's a few journal prompts. All of the journal prompts that I've done for this book, I've put in like a separate journal so that I can have, a clean slate every time. And I can also go back and see kind of the progress that I've made. There's also, so this is really cool too. There's an exposure task record sheet. So they use a bit of exposure therapy. Now, it's really hard to expose yourself to death and dying without being a person who is dying. So, exposure therapy for a fear of snakes, you could be surrounded by snakes. Or a fear of spiders, you could interact with spiders, and that's part of exposure therapy. But it's hard to do that with death and dying. So they give you ideas for how to expose yourself to, the idea of your own mortality. And they give you a little chart that you can chart how anxious it made you, how, the discomfort you had when you started it versus, at its height of anxiety, the discomfort, of the duration of the discomfort. And it's really, I found it really great for tracking, when we talk about the exercises, seeing your progress on it, if something is getting easier to think about. So some of the examples of exercises to prepare yourself for death are collecting memento mori. Memento mori is a Latin word for remembering you must die. So think about like a skull or a taxidermied animal, or, it could be something as simple as, a picture of a, for example, my friend Pedro gave me a ceramic skull that was beautifully painted, and that can be a memento mori. Anything that reminds you that you are mortal and that you will someday die. Again, this can bring a lot of anxiety to people, and that's why it's important to track your discomfort with these different exercises. Another example of an exercise that I really like is this one, making your will, which is really important, even especially for people who are not ill or facing death. It is important for everybody, no matter what your state of health, no matter what your age, to create a will and these other documents that have to do with what happens to you in the stages of the end of your life and after you have died. Because you need to give people a roadmap, or else they might be left scrambling to try and hopefully do the best they can for you. And in some cases, especially for queer and trans people, you want to be the one specifying the things that your loved ones are going to be carrying out. It's really important. And it's a good exercise for dealing with your own mortality. So it's kind of, a 2-in-1 deal there. The next one is to go to a death cafe. I am a little biased because I run a death cafe here in Ferndale, a queer death cafe, and I love death cafes. I went to my first one like two years ago, and it was amazing. It was just such an amazing experience because we can laugh, we can hold space for each other, we can hold space for silence, and you get like coffee and tea and cake sometimes. So I highly suggest going to a death cafe. You can find a death cafe near you by going online and searching death cafe. There's an organization in the UK who kind of like started the trend of death cafes, and they have everything, all of the death cafes online on their website. So you can see if there's one near you. I highly suggest it. It's a lot more fun than you think. Writing your funeral wishes is another important one. Again, it's important to have a roadmap for the people that are going to be here after you have died and are going to need your wishes, and I think that this is a really good one, a really good exercise, because it can almost be cathartic. It can almost be, in a way, fun to plan your funeral. What songs are you going to play? What are you going to wear? Where is it going to be? Not only are these important things for people to know, but it's important for you as well. It's a way for you to get your thoughts onto paper, and to sit with maybe some discomfort with that and see how that feels. So there are a lot more. I'm looking through this. There are a lot more really, really great exercises about trauma work, writing prompts. This is another. This is another. It's like spreadsheets and values, like a spreadsheet about values, like what do you value? It's a really great book. So, to wrap up, did it help? I think it helped me a lot. I continue to go to this book. It's a go-to book for me. I found it incredibly useful. Being able to put things down on paper is so therapeutic for me, and that's why, CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, works a lot with writing things down, journaling. And I don't prefer that method of therapy when I'm like face to face with a therapist, but I do love its ability to translate to writing. I love to write and I love to journal. And so it's really, really beneficial to have a book like this that can walk you through the exercises, the prompts, in order to get all of this anxiety written down on paper and to be able to dive deep into it. Now, as I mentioned before, it's definitely not a comfortable read. It's one that takes a lot of digging, a lot of discomfort sometimes. And I can understand if someone is not in the place, the mindset for that just yet. That's why I also suggested this book by Thich Nhat Hanh called No Death, No Fear. This is also a really good one. It is a very comforting book. It says it on the front page, comforting wisdom for life, right? So if you wanted to start there and start to think about mortality and then get into this workbook, that would be totally understandable. But I do think that this workbook is really, really helpful for people that struggle with death and dying anxiety. So be sure to check it out and let me know what you thought. I would love to discuss more about these books. And yeah, so I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.